Please, tell me what the joke is.
Why did the golfer bring an extra pair of pants to the golf course?
In case he made a hole in one?
Yes.
The joke is so old, but it's so funny.
Okay, I know, sorry. Okay, look alive. Hello, and welcome back. Today we are going to be doing our final trip review of our 9-night New Year's Eve sailing on the Grandeur of the Seas. The Grandeur of the Seas is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, ship in the Royal Caribbean fleet. It was our first time sailing on what many refer to her affectionately as the Lady G. We're going to be reviewing travel. You can hear Raj Rust Bucket. We're going to be reviewing our travel, the hotel where we stayed the night before, boarding day, the Grandeur itself, the ship, the ports that we went to, and then just some final thoughts. So with that, we will dive right in for travel. We flew out of a tiny little regional airport in Massachusetts, Worcester, Mass, called Worcester Airport. We flew on JetBlue. They had a nonstop flight from Worcester down to Fort Lauderdale. We actually really enjoy flying out of this airport whenever possible. It is kind of tiny, so flight options are limited, but it's a very calm experience. It's a very quiet airport.
I prefer small airports.
Yes.
Four gates?
Four gates. Raj really enjoys flying out of there just because it's very calm. It's very quiet. There's no chaos.
What I don't understand is why they have so many parking spaces in the parking lot if it's such a small airport.
That's an interesting question. Ooh, bless you. The one thing to be mindful of if you do happen to fly out of Worcester, Mass, is there really are very, very limited food options. So there's only like a convenience store type option there where they have some prepackaged sandwiches and bagels, chips, pretzels, bagged foods like that. They do have a bar and they offer pizza, but other than that, there really aren't any food options. We had an evening flight. I think it was leaving 5:30, something like that. So our plan had been to buy food on the plane. Typically JetBlue offers snack packs and sometimes sandwiches and salads for purchase on the plane. So we intended to just do that on the plane. When we boarded, they announced that there was going to be no food available for purchase on the plane. So
And we've flown in and out of that airport, and that particular place that sells the prepackaged food is not always open. It has some limited hours, so it's not 24/7. So just be mindful if you ever go out of there. You may want to be prepared to have an alternative, unless you know for sure the hours are open.
But our Fort Lauderdale-based crew on that flight down with JetBlue was wonderful as always. Raj delivered his chocolates. It's actually the first time, they were very appreciative, but it is the first time that we've run into a situation where one of the flight crew thanked us, but said that they couldn't accept because he was allergic to chocolate. He tried to give it back, and we offered to have him share it with somebody else. So he actually offered it to the pilots, and the pilots were very, very thankful. They came out and said thank you. They had done a back-to-back flight, so they were happy to have the little burst of sugar there. But that was kind of a thing where we're like, oh, okay, maybe we need to think of an alternative for those cases where the chocolate can't be appreciated by someone because they're unable to enjoy it for that reason. So we'll be thinking of a plan B as a little treat for our flight crew in those cases. But it was a great flight down. JetBlue, we've always been happy to fly with them, pretty much. Any thoughts on flight or Worcester Airport on the way down? So once we arrived at Fort Lauderdale, it was pretty late. We were pretty hungry. We got our bags. We ended up getting the hotel shuttle from the airport to the hotel. This was a little bit of a weird situation. They sent us from bag claim.
Yeah. When you call the
Yes.
hotel to find out, to get, to notify them that we were there, we were expecting the shuttle, they had us go to departure level because arrival level was so jam-packed that the shuttle drivers said it would be at least 40 minutes just to get there from the initial chute. And it was, for some reason, it was it was the weekend leading up to New Year's Eve, so there's a lot of people coming in and traveling, leaving or coming in. So we went up. It wasn't a big deal, and he found us very easily. We mutually found each other pretty easily, and then he tried to get another 4 couples, and then
4 other parties.
Yeah, and that probably took another 45 minutes. We had to go around once or twice. I can't remember now.
We went around twice.
And he wasn't making that up. The airport was jammed. I mean, traffic was just ridiculous. So just be mindful if you're on a tight schedule coming into Fort Lauderdale in any way. It's become a very popular airport. I think it's probably been a very popular airport, but for that region, it's a really good alternative to Miami.
Stayed at a home to in Dania
Home to
Beach,
Suite,
which was about 5-10 minutes from the airport. They do offer shuttles to the cruise ports in both Fort Lauderdale and Miami. We contemplated signing up for one of the shuttles, but the earliest arrival time for the Miami shuttle, because we were sailing out of Miami for the Grandeur, would have gotten down to Miami 2 hours after our boarding time. So we decided we were going to do a lift to the Miami terminal, so that didn't work out for us. But between the late arrival, I think we didn't arrive until like 9:30, 9:45. Time we got settled, the only thing that was open was a Domino's pizza.
I was happy about that.
So very, very late dinner.
We were very hungry.
We were very hungry. The other issue is that the Wi-Fi was not great.
Yeah, not just Wi-Fi, but cellular service was oddly just
non-existent.
Never experienced that. And this was a very urban, commercial, developed area. We've never experienced that like that.
In the building. It was fine outside the building.
Well, you had to get a little ways away from the building, which
Right.
again was kind of bizarre. But in the internet service, you'd connect to the Wi-Fi just fine, but there was no internet. I think it finally came back up the next morning, before we left. But
so next morning we had breakfast at the hotel, which was typical, standard free breakfast at one of the Hilton properties, and then got a lift to Miami Terminal. Because of the construction near the Miami Terminal area, I think the original lift estimate when you...
We're in 25 minutes, I think.
Yeah, something like an hour and 25 minutes. I think we ended up getting there in about an hour. Yeah. We went all the way down to Terminal G. So in the past, we've sailed out of Terminal A in Miami for the bigger ships. So this was way, way, way down at the end.
Yeah. It was the other. It was sort of the end of the horseshoe, or the U that you do
before you start exiting.
And honestly, to be honest with you, if it wasn't that time of day when other disembarkation was happening, honestly, I think probably 15-20 minutes was just sitting in traffic trying to navigate past the higher numbered ports to get down to to our terminal.
And you see that in the boarding day video, like where we're driving past all the other terminals with the ships. The suites boarding process was the standard Miami, very efficient suites boarding process. This, however, was the first time that we've experienced having a separate seating area. They were not ready for us to start boarding the ship immediately when we arrived. So at first they put us kind of in the general boarding queue, and then someone had asked where the suites boarding sitting area was, and they're like, oh, this is where you go for the suites. And so they had a separate little seating area for suites guests, and they had continental breakfast with some pastries and coffee and tea and water and juice, things like that. So it was a nice little quiet spot to hang out, not quite as large and crowded. The boarding was pretty smooth. I mean, I think Miami, second to Rome, I think has probably been one of the best boarding experiences we've ever had. That held true this time around as well for Terminal G, even though we've never sailed out of it before. As far as Grandeur This was our very first New Year's sailing. It's our first holiday sailing. The others, the last couple of years, were canceled because of the pandemic. We were in a junior suite, the Grandeur. I feel like the ship needs some TLC. Our balcony had a lot of rust on it. There were things in the room that were broken and not working. There was, what was the thing on the wall?
In the shower, the tub had a fiberglass repair that was all discolored. It was patched, it was broken through. So it was perfectly fine, and actually technically had a little bit of extra traction on the relative, usually slippery floor there in the shower. But
convincing Raj to take a shower for the first 3 days was a bit of a nightmare.
It definitely looked dirty, but and you can see we've already posted the room tour, and you can, I think, you can see
where that square is in the base of the tub.
Yeah. One positive is, I think they really, back then when they've designed this, they really put a tremendous amount of idea for storage, and maybe because it's so old and early, I was pretty impressed with all the different drawers and the different cubbies and stuff. Challenging when you pack to make sure you don't, you check all that stuff and clear all that area, but that was actually pretty handy. I was very pleasantly surprised on that.
Like the space in the ottoman,
Yep.
the secret storage in the ottoman and stuff. Yeah, we did have what was on the wall? Was it a magazine rack?
Oh yes, it was a magazine rack.
And
it was like a 3-tiered magazine rack, and
Raj bumped into it, and one of the pieces fell off of it.
Well, I remember getting up the first morning and just put my hand on the wall, or just trying to navigate, half asleep, and I remember just touching the fascia of it, and it just popped out and made a big noise. So I was the first one that knocked it over, and I barely touched it.
So you broke it.
Well, it was broken before. It was just sitting there. It was just standing there.
It was broken before. It's why it calls
just
it
gives you
bucket.
Yeah. How about you come join us?
No, you insult me.
So it just kind of gives you a little bit of a clue and a little bit of a vintage feel when there's a 3-tier magazine rack. It's just you don't see that unless you go to old doctor's offices, right? It hasn't been renovated in 30, 40 years.
We also had an electrical issue 2 nights in.
Yeah.
I went to use the blow dryer that was in the room. I didn't bring any contraband items. I plugged in the blow dryer that they provided, and maybe about 3 minutes into using it, a fuse blew and all of the lights in the room, all the power basically went out. So
it was a little bit odd because it wasn't super consistent. There was a few lights that were still on, but bulk of them were, but the bathroom wasn't on. So I'm not sure how the fuses work in there. I mean, and on that ship, we were really challenged to making sure we kept everything plugged in and stuff. So being down one, we reported immediately, and it wasn't something that was resolved before we left the room. So
for food on the ship, I felt like all of the food that we got in the main dining room was wonderful. It was limited choice for food, though. Smaller, older ship, there were not as many options as we're used to on the ships that we've been on before. Yes, Raj?
I will say, really, really, really enjoyed the turkey on New Year's Eve.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Yes, Raj tried turkey on the ship for the first time, so that was something new. So now he has something else that he's adding to his list of things that he'll be eating on Royal Caribbean sailings going forward, so that was wonderful.
But probably not at Thanksgiving.
Probably not at Thanksgiving.
Unless we're happy to be on a Royal
I prefer your Thanksgiving turkey.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. It was also our first experience in the MDR with shared seating for dinner, so we...
Really?
Yeah, it was. That was
that our first or second cruise?
No,
that was a key lunch that we sat with.
Yeah, that was the key
but
lunch.
That wasn't a nightly.
That wasn't a nightly seated dinner. So that was our first experience with that. We were, shown to a table there, it was just the 3 of us. And so our table had 6 seats and we sat down, and then, our menus were handed to us. We were already taking our order for appetizers when another family was brought over to our table, another family of 3. And we met the McKays. And so that was, it was different, but it turned out to be really nice. It was very enjoyable to kind of spend that time at dinner, kind of rehashing our days. They did different excursions than we did during this sailing, so it was nice to chat about, you know, how they spent their days. And honestly, Raj pretty much spent this entire cruise reading his Kindle, not doing any of the activities or interacting with other people on the ship for the most part. So we enjoyed hearing about their son's day. Yep. And all we saw their son on the ship and went past him. Hey, Austin, how's it going? Right? He was busy on the rock wall and doing all the teen club activities. So it was nice to be able to hear about.
And maybe this is something a new situation, but it seemed like the teen program was really robust. And honestly, with a smaller ship, I would see Austin numerous times doing relatively different activities. That would he be either with his group in the Centrum, which is sort of the center piece, and pretty much all the activities kind of are centered there. Music, dance, that sort of stuff. But yeah, I'd see him several times a night through, even until late when I'd be at the nightclub and coming back once in a while. So it was again, it was neat to have familiarity and but yeah, it was
a friendly face.
Yeah,
you know, we talked about the activities. So there were a lot of activities on the ship because there weren't as many of the bells and whistles, like, you know, no flow rider, no ice skating rink, things like that. So there were actually a ton of trivia games, dance parties, things like that. And as he mentioned, the design of the ship is completely unlike anything we're used to. We've never been on a Royal Caribbean ship that didn't have a Royal Promenade. So we haven't been on the Radiance class or any of the other Vision class ships. So this was a first for us. And it really felt like everything was kind of driving
out of the Centrum.
To the Centrum, right?
Like there wasn't a lot of things on the front of the ship. In fact, there's almost nothing on the front of the ship. Almost everything was in the back. Mm-hmm. Another thing that was different was the photos. Oh, yes,
the photos was also different. This is the first ship we've been on.
If you're accustomed to photos and you do the photo package on bigger ships and newer ships, it's a stark shock. There's no digital elements to it. They don't ask for room numbers. They just take pictures, and they have this gallery and they group the photos, ceiling to floor, based off of either a venue or a venue in a day or a night, an event, and you get to flip through them and you buy that photo.
The old school.
Yeah, 8x10, pretty much. Yeah, so if you're kind of enthusiast of the photo package and find it a value and a good way for the people that don't normally get in your photos, that are taking the photos on vacations, I would be a little bit more cautious about doing that on this one, because we went there 3 times and we didn't even find the stuff that we thought. And to be honest with you, we didn't buy the package I'm not sure why we didn't buy the package. We usually do, but I think because we had just had the package of the previous cruise ship.
We had an issue getting our photos from the Odyssey when we bought the package, right, and I'm done buying the photo package until they can get their act together. So
one thing, just going back to the design of the ship, I've never used the stairs as much as I have on this one, and it's not a bad thing, to be honest with you, because it probably helped. We were on the deck right below the Lido deck, so going to the pool and that sort of stuff with Jim or that sort of stuff. We were 1 floor up, so why? And the elevators were. We tried to figure out the pattern. There was one that was almost broken all the time or out of service. I think maybe by design. I don't know, but it was not logical in any way. I could not discern a pattern of use, and so at some point we were just, unless we were going down 5 or 6 floors, to get up, disembark, we contemplating, using the stairs, and we use the stairs a lot. So there's an upside to that. We got my steps in a little bit more than usual, and didn't waste time waiting in the elevators. But just something to be mindful of.
There's a huge casino on the ship. It was actually one of the coolest ones that I've been in. They had, it felt like they put a lot of thought into designing the casino. I didn't feel like it was very crowded at all. At least the times. The only issue was Raj would get nervous having to walk through it because you had to pass through the casino in order to get to the Palladium Theater most of the time. And so, in the theater, the entertainment I thought was really good. There was quite a few shows that Raj wanted to go. I know you were not big on like seeing many of the theater shows, but like Raj was a checkerboard guy. Checkerboard guy. We went to see in the theater was enjoyable. He was like tossing out the cards and things.
Yes.
Yes. And then we saw.
I did not enjoy the cards, considering one card literally said lethal if thrown correctly.
Yes. Well, anything can be lethal if used incorrectly. So there's that. Nashville Tenors. I don't know. I think overall I felt like the entertainment was pretty robust on the ship, but again, it was kind of alternated the show nights with kind of the evening entertainment in the Centrum, like kind of usually something big happening.
Yeah, every night there wasn't anything in the Palladium, which is kind of on the ships that have the Royal Theater, there's usually something or usually multiple things, multiple viewings, or even multiple events in the Royal Theater. This was not the case. There's usually one, maybe two, and it wasn't every night. I will say I was a big fan of the layout, the design, primarily because it's not as cramped as most of the Royal Theater for legroom and stuff, because it's more of a style of a less of a less of a decline. It's more like a flatter-ish rake, that's the word I'm looking for, towards the stage, and they're more comfy chairs designed,
and the upper deck even has like couches that don't have armrests.
Yeah. So it's a really cool venue.
Check it out if you're on the ship.
Yeah, for sure.
We also spent time at the Next Cruise bookings desk for the first time in a long time.
That was a primary activity.
Yeah, that was a primary activity. We were there
on
pretty
AC
much
day.
every day after the second day. Socorro was amazing on that ship. With this one, we weren't quite sure if we were going to end up being able to do the trip. My mom ended up having an issue which kind of landed her in the hospital, and she insisted that we go on this trip anyway, but I was understandably worried about her. She's like, oh, it's fine, you can call me and we'll stay in touch and everything will be great. And for those of you that are subscribed, you've seen our note, and for those of you that are family and friends, you already know we have canceled our April trip to Australia with a Trans-Pacific cruise, headed to Hawaii because of her health issues. But this all was happening at the time that we were on the Grandeur, and one of the scary things for me is while we were on the Grandeur, quite frankly, the Voom internet, we paid for the Voom Surf and Stream, and it sucked. Quite frankly, it was just completely terrible.
And it wasn't just guest-facing internet connectivity. It was actually even staff. I mean, there was a lot of stuff. As many days on sea days that I would go to the pool, and they would actually pull out the paper logs and noting because the towel check-in and check-out was not the technology, the normal checkout on the laptops wasn't functioning. So it was very bad. And there was some different gyrations on getting connected, and if it was going to work, it was ideally work where they had the Voom
where
lounge,
they had the Voom lounge,
and when there was an attendant, and even that time, even there were several times where you go down and it wasn't even working there. So we were told that in the end of February that the Starlink is going to be being deployed to upgrade the existing service, which will be a huge thing. But I would, if you're planning a trip, I would highly recommend try to find out if and when that Starlink is in place, because if not, do not waste your money or any expectation that you're going to have internet connectivity. It was ridiculous. It was our first. sustainable bad experience. Most of the time you have hit or miss
with a
occasion
storm
with
or
a storm,
like something,
right,
and that's understandable, right? Like
on
that's going to
previous
happen.
ships that we've been on. But this one made us really think about, wow, this could be really isolating. Both Pon and I, we like to be available for emergency work issues on IT, but it's with Gigi and want to stay somewhat in connection with things. And often, Raj gets a lot of his virtual learning done on the ship. So, and that didn't happen either. So, just it was a little bit of a wake up call, but and also it was a huge contrast to the week after Thanksgiving. We were on the Navigator, who has recently had Starlink upgraded, and that service was just rock solid. It wasn't super fast, but it was rock solid. We actually, with the second day we had them, we canceled it, and they prorated it pretty heavily.
It was on the fourth day. Because
yeah.
this was the second day we ended up at Next Cruise because I hadn't been able to get in touch with my mom at that point. We were on a sea day, and I went to Next Cruise to say, all right, what are our options related to this booking that we have? Because I don't know what's happening with my mom. I'm not okay with being halfway around the world, because if the internet is going to be an issue, like it is on this ship, I can't go. I'm not okay with going.
Right, and that trip has a tremendous amount of sea days. There's not a lot of port days,
right.
So
and
it's not like even have an opportunity for emergency to get off the ship. And,
correct.
So
Socorro actually, like, her first thing to me was, we're not talking about your booking. She's like, call this number, tell them that Socorro said you can have a courtesy call your mom and make sure she's okay. And that to me was just, that human factor was like, at that moment in time, like after having almost 2.5 days of no contact with my mom, she was supposed to be undergoing tests for like EKG and like all this stuff, like not knowing what was happening back home was just really weighing on me. And so it was such a relief. And so we went back the next day and met with her, and even before that, like she called later that afternoon, and she's like, did you get in touch with your mom? She had left a voicemail. Did you get in touch with your mom? Is she doing okay? It was just that kind of follow-up where it was just like, wow. Like,
and I'll be honest, this was the first time that, and maybe because on this ship the Next Cruise is so primary to the Centrum, so it's a high traffic area, people in and out of there. But I mean, she was busy. I mean, and she had a partner. I forgot the other lady's name, but they were both usually had someone sitting there when they had office hours. So I mean, it wasn't like she was just twiddling her thumbs and saying, "Oh, I'll check in on Pana and make sure she got a hold of it." I mean, she made time. It was very clear and constantly busy. And I mean, we were there several times, and we made arrangement bookings, and it was usually slim pickings. I was pretty amazed, and I have to assume that it has to do with her level of able to sell and people skills and all that. I mean, she clearly knows solution selling just by her first offer, by getting a courtesy call set up for us allowed. It's good to know they have a toolbox of such a technique.
Yeah, she fixed a book later. We had purchased a book later certificate where they did not add our onboard credit when we made the phone call. And she like, wait, what do you mean they didn't add the onboard credit? And so we explained the situation, and she's like taking all these notes. By the time we were done talking, she's like, okay, I sent an email to my supervisor who's shoreside. She's like, I'm gonna update you. And then again later, like with the follow-up, right, like we came back from our shore excursion, like later that day, she called. She's like, listen, I'm calling to let you know that I talked to my supervisor, and the onboard credit's been added. I'm gonna have the updated booking confirmation sent up to your cabin. And like, I was just like, wow, okay, great. We ended up making 7 reservations, but we basically had a standing appointment with her every day for like the rest of that sailing.
Like I said, primary activity. Breakfast, next cruise,
and then whatever.
Lunch was maybe not dinner, and those are sort of the staples of the trip, really.
Those were the staples of the strip.
Yes.
It's true. The ship, I think, felt understaffed. And this was very, very noticeable, I think, especially in the Windjammer. We, I think, only went to the
Just
Windjammer twice.
One aspect of the
Right.
Windjammer is lacking, in my opinion.
Well, we only, I think, went to the Windjammer twice. It was very, very undersized, I think, for the number of people that were on the ship.
Crew was hustling. It wasn't that they were
Right.
they were hustling. It was just
It was very
they
clear
didn't have enough.
they didn't have enough
crew
people
to satisfy, in my opinion. But go ahead. Sorry, I'm stepped on you. Where you were going with that?
No, I was just gonna say that, like, it just, the food I thought was fine, but they didn't have as much variety. It was definitely the smallest Windjammer we've ever been in. It was really hard you'd go get your food and then you do like 3 laps around the
3 to 5
Windjammer
laps around
to try to find
a
spot.
find a spot for 3 of us, and that was even not looking for like a separate table, even open to group tables. And a lot of times these were off peak times, what I would assume would be peak. So I was really taken back by that usually, and maybe it's just, again, older ship, older design, didn't really quite know the needs. I don't. That's some of the speculation on my part, but it was very off-putting in that respect.
And then opposite Windjammer, the Windjammer was also forward on this ship.
Finally, a Windjammer, not on the back of the ship, like on the new ships. It's funny.
It was forward, so I kept getting confused every time we'd go up there because I keep sending, like, Raj, we gotta go to the back, we gotta go aft, and he's like, no, Mom, it's forward on this ship, and I'm like, no, the Windjammer's always to the aft of the ship. He's like, no, it's not, and we'd like start arguing about it, and of course he was always right, because we get up there and I'm like, oh, that's the Solarium and Park Cafe, and not Windjammer,
and just a note on that part, actually, one first comment, when we made errors and Raj corrected us, being such a small ship, it was like a 2 or 3 minute error. On the other ships, you can really burn 15 minutes trying to get back on track. So there's an upside to being a smaller ship, but there was no really policing or no concerns. A lot of people, younger, Solarium, if you're really like the Solarium and adult only and no kids around, this is not the ship for you. It's more, it's larger in layout. It's spread out. It feels actually, the Solarium area feels bigger than any of the Solariums I've been on, even on the Wonder. It was a very roomy. It was rougher on the edges. It's an older ship, but it was kind of spread out, relaxed, and it was never crowded. Since they don't have a Sorrento's or sort of an all-day eating spot, in the back of the Solarium was, what do they call it? Park Cafe. The original Park Cafe, I guess, because we're accustomed to the Park Cafe on the Oasis class ships. But that was drink station, water. If you had the drink package, you could get soda and stuff. But there was juice, flavored waters, and water, ice, cups, coffee. Was readily available, I believe, 24/7. Because I was there as late a few nights as like 2:30 or 3 in the morning, and it was still, people were getting pizza and getting sandwiches.
They have late at night. So Park Cafe, we never noticed that they were open for any breakfast type foods. I felt like
Maybe
the
some
only
fruit.
food options for breakfast was either Cafe Latitudes, which was just like pastries in the morning with coffee, or Windjammer and MDR. And there was no brunch in the MDR. And then Park Cafe, while Windjammer was open, Park Cafe would be closed. When Windjammer closed at 3 o'clock, Park Cafe would open at 3:30 and stay open until like 5:30, when MDR would open for first seating for dinner. And then Park Cafe would open back up around 9 o'clock, 9:30, something like that, once the late seating for MDR was done and Windjammer had closed. So they kind of had staggered times for meal service on the ship, so that was like another thing that we're unaccustomed to, where we're on a ship and there aren't multiple choices available to go grab something to eat at any given point in time.
Fine if you're a new cruiser and that's your ship, that's your reference, but if you're on the bigger ships and you kind of like that flexibility, or issues come up that
or you have a picky eater,
or non-traditional eater in terms of time and what he eats, just be mindful that the Granger's going to be a little bit more challenging there.
Yeah, from that perspective, for sure. But I thought the crew overall on the ship, they were wonderful. It felt understaffed, and they were all working, like busting, like all the time. I mean, they were moving constantly. We saw our waiter Jonathan. He was working breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I think when we were on the Navigator, just the previous month to that, our MDR waiter John, he worked in the Windjammer for lunch, and he also covered dinner in the MDR, but he did not also have to work a breakfast shift. So it's just little things like that where it felt like the crew for sure on the Grandeur was just working extra hard. I don't know, but they were all wonderful, very friendly. Would we ever sail on the Grandeur again? I don't know that it would be my first choice. I don't know that I would rule it out completely. It was very interesting to sail on a smaller ship. I think I enjoyed the experience, crew and passenger experience, like the activities and things like that. I didn't enjoy the ship itself, other than kind of the layout and design. I would love to see, what Royal Caribbean might come up with as far as innovation if they were to ever build a small ship, a new sub 3,000 passenger ship. Like, I would be very curious to see what they would come up with and to sail on that, because I enjoyed the experience. I just had some concerns about, like...
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the aspects of the cruise and the ship that I enjoyed was that it was very dance opportunity friendly, because the center
that's your every night.
And that's my every night. So a lot of music opportunity, and the performers were really good, and there was quite a variety. Sailing out of Miami, it was heavy on Latin music, which is perfectly fine with me. The other thing is going back to the whole, using the stairs. There's something about just doing a couple sets of stairs to get where you want to go, versus, and sometimes on these bigger ships, 20 depth ship, I mean, you're not going to do stairs up 12. I mean, I don't care how. There's people that do it, obviously, but just not on a regular basis. And it's definitely not an option unless they're all down and you need to get somewhere. But
so that's it for the Grandeur itself. On the ports, we had a total of 5 port stops on this 9-night sailing. Our first port stop was Puerto, Plata, Dominican Republic. This was our first time at this port. We docked at Taino Bay. It is a new port. It's a very nice port. Yeah. They have invested a lot of money in building up the port area, and they have done a wonderful job.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
You'll see in the video the port area. They have, exotic birds, and they have a pool that's free to use. They have some beach areas with chairs that you can sit at. There's obviously, you have to pay for drinks and food and whatever you use there. But it's nice that if you don't have an excursion planned, you don't want to be on the ship all day, you just want to kind of get off and hang out for a while, you can do that and not have to spend a lot of money. We did have an excursion booked. You'll see that in the Dominican video for Puerto Plata that day. We highly enjoyed the excursion. We had originally booked a completely different excursion, and when we went into our cabin, there was a note from the shore excursions team saying that it had been canceled, and come visit our shore excursions desk and pick something else. We'll give you a 20% discount. So we ended up doing the City Explorer tour instead of the one we had originally booked, and we didn't really know what to expect. And it ended up actually being wonderful.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, we went to
Laid
the
back.
Umbrella Street, walked around. Thomasina was very
What was the
friendly.
museum? The Heritage Museum?
Yeah, we went to, we stopped at a museum, it was a combination of like some bus driving, walking downtown, getting back on the bus, driving to the fort, doing some more walking. There were photo stops. So it was a nice way to kind of get a good highlight type of tour of, hey, this is what there is to see in this area of Dominican Republic. And the people that we did encounter for locals, they were just very welcoming, just very friendly. And so that was very nice. And then after we got back early enough that we were able to walk around the port area a little bit before heading back to the ship. Second port stop was Tortola, British Virgin Islands. And for this one, originally we wanted to do the baths at Virgin Gorda. And I waited too long to book the excursion, and it sold out. And as most of you know, we pretty much exclusively book our short excursions through Royal Caribbean, especially when traveling. The only time I think we've done independent excursions was in Alaska, because we figured, hey, we're in Alaska. It's a U.S. state. It'll be somewhat safe. But didn't book in time, it sold out, and so we ended up doing the Town and Country Drive through Royal Caribbean. Our Raj loves it because it was what do they call it, Reshi? The safari buses, where it's open on both sides and they kind of have the bench seating.
With the canopy over,
like
so
with the
right outside.
camping, right? And
the excursions with those buses are always my favorites.
A lot of opportunity to film just beautiful vistas, really, really significant elevation changes. So, this is probably second or third to my favorite island.
Yeah.
Still second to St. Kitts. St. Kitts is a hard one to, and Antigua is right up there too for me. But
it was beautiful.
Beautiful, just amazing vistas, and every corner had something just beautiful to look at, and seeing multiple islands in the distance, because like I said, the elevation changes going up, it was very quick. Other than the last bit, which was one of my favorite excursions actually.
Yeah, it was a Town and Country Drive, so it did do the drive, and then the second piece of it was supposed to be a short stop at the beach, so Cane Garden Bay Beach. And you can see more in the video. The excursion says that it was supposed to be a 1 hour stop at the beach. It ended up being over 2 hours. Because of that, Raj is not a fan of the beach, not remotely a fan of the beach, does not like sand, will not walk in sand. He's the person that you see basically covered head to toe. If a grain of sand touches his skin, bloody murder will be cried. And so because of that, we chose to leave the excursion early and paid extra money to take a shared taxi back to port. Yes, buddy.
Anakin Skywalker is the correct view on sand.
And what would that be?
It's coarse, it's rough, and it gets everywhere.
Yes, that is true. But,
And also that beach didn't have a whole lot of shaded seating areas, so we've contemplated waiting it out, but it was more of a challenge than we thought. So just be mindful of that. If you're picking that one and the beach isn't your choice, just be mindful it's going to be 2 hours, and it's possible to get back early. It was actually another safari style transport that we rode back on. Actually, same company, but
yeah. And there's more details in the video for that short excursion. Our third port stop was Fort de France in Martinique. And here we did the panoramic tour through Royal Caribbean again. That tour actually started 25 minutes earlier than the printed shore excursion time. So again, notice the trend with the timings on these shore excursion descriptions. I thought it was a nice excursion. They were huge coach buses, very comfortable, right? We sat on the wrong side of the bus. So the majority of the vistas are actually on the left side of the bus. We ended up sitting on the right side of the bus, so we kind of got, our window was right mountainside for the most part, where all of the sweeping views were kind of the left side. There's no bathroom on the bus that we were on, so, there was a 10-minute stop at a church, which supposedly had a bathroom in there, and then there was a 40-minute drive to the rainforest, but, other than that, you're pretty much 3.5 hours without access to...
One of the interesting things that I had noticed is for an island, at least in my understanding prior to the excursion, I didn't expect the roads to be in the quality they were. I mean, they were tight, but they were there was pavement everywhere. They were smooth. Mm-hmm. I mean, to be honest with you, to the point, if we go back there, I would be open to renting a vehicle and go and tour it ourselves, because it's a beautiful island. There's beautiful vistas.
Fourth port stop was Bridgetown, Barbados. In Bridgetown, Barbados, it was the combination tour of the Atlantis submarine, followed by the Bridgetown tour, bus tour. I personally loved the submarine portion of the tour. I did not love the driving around portion after the tour.
In stark contrast, the roads were horrible. And to be honest with you, probably half the roads we traveled, even though they were main thoroughfares, were dirt roads.
I should have packed some Depends. I should have worn some Depends during that.
Not a lot of bio break opportunities either. Really tested patience towards the last hour of the trip, if I recall. It also didn't help that it started getting a little rainy, so the vistas turned into being not so beautiful. And we felt like we were just driving through third world sort of dirt roaded areas.
Well, I think the other issue was the excursion initially said that it was going to be 5 hours long, and it ended up being closer to 6.5 hours long, and at this point it started at 8 o'clock in the morning. We're well past lunchtime at this point, right? Well past lunchtime, so there'd been quite a bit of time spent on the bus. No stop for bathrooms or food. Well, one stop for a bathroom at that little
High Point, the vista look, the overlook,
the pull-off that they did. But other than that, there was no opportunity to purchase, water or snacks or anything like that, and it just felt really, really long.
Yeah, I think the other part was there was, compared to a lot of other excursions we've done of this nature, there was very little information conveyed. So
we were just driving around town.
There wasn't much pointing out, much history talked about. There was a couple things here.
There's our hospital.
There's Royale. There's our palace. Oh, okay. But it felt like there could have been better content in that respect. Might have made it not been just a transportation experience. Mm-hmm. Well, it could be a learning experience. A lot of room for improvement there.
Yeah. So they did offer just the Atlantis submarine tour. And I think if we were to ever go back to Barbados, I would do that in a heartbeat again, just the submarine portion of the tour, because I think all three of us enjoyed that. It was not fun getting into the submarine or being squished in the submarine with... Yeah.
If you're bigger than me, I would seriously consider it. It wasn't comfortable for me. It was an enjoyable experience, but it wasn't a comfortable getting in and out, and even in the form seats were pretty tight. But just if you're much bigger than I am, you may want to consider not doing it. Unfortunately.
And then our final port stop was not a new to us port. It was St. John's, Antigua. We were there last January and did a shore excursion that kind of took us all around the island to Shirley Heights and Nelson's Dockyard and all of that. So we did not book an excursion this time because the one that Raj wanted to do was called the Legends and Lores of Antigua walking tour? Yeah. Was that the one? Where
I didn't understand why I could go on a Segway tour where I am more likely to kill myself on a Segway Yeah, I am 4 years underage for a walking tour.
I suspect it was the subject matter was not perceived
related,
to be
probably.
Yeah.
So I think it was called the Legends and Lores Walking Tour. We were not able to book it online in advance. There was a minimum age requirement of 16, and so I was not able to book. I was only able to book it for the two of us, not for him. So I just didn't book it at all. I'm like, oh, well, when we get on the ship, we'll just check in with the shore excursions desk. And when we went there to actually book the Dominican Republic, the new excursion for there, I had asked about Antigua, and what we were told is that the shore excursion provider that they use, they set the minimum age limit, and they don't provide a reason as to why. Because as Raj points out, aptly so, he would have been able to drive his own Segway on a Segway tour in Antigua.
But no, we didn't book that.
We did not book that.
For more obvious reasons than maybe not so obvious.
But he's not allowed to participate in a walking tour. And the only reason we could figure is that there must have been something related to the content that they were going to be delivering during that tour that they deemed was inappropriate for anyone that was under the age of 16. So that's one, Raj, as soon as we got to the island, he was already in a mood. The morning that we pulled in, we decided we would just try to walk around the wharf area, because they have a beautifully built wharf area. There's lots of shops. It's very scenic. Just even the sail into Antigua is very scenic. And you'll see that in the Antigua video, some of that. But we thought, hey, we'll just explore kind of that downtown area near the port and see, what there is.
All shopping opportunities, various things
around there. We started to do that and had to just cut it short because he was not having a good day. And this sometimes happens, right? Like, life happens, we're human, everything is not always sunshine and rainbows.
Last port too, so
it was our last port, and it was a very long cruise. We'd have like multiple back-to-back port days with excursions, and the one the day before, like we said, the one in Barbados, it was overlong and not eating on time. It was kind of exhausting. He did not have a good day in Antigua. And so after a little bit of walking around, we just decided to go back to the ship, and he had a nap and did some reading and just kind of chilled out for the rest of the day. And oftentimes that's what vacationing ends up being for us, right? We often have to follow the direction that is set by Raj, because if it's not comfortable for him, if he's not going to feel safe, then we can't do it. We're not going to move forward with it. And so we kind of have to follow the guidance that he's providing a little bit. So don't have much content there to provide, but New Year's Eve party. So the New Year's Eve party was rocking out. What we really loved about, we've never been on a holiday sailing with Royal before, and so one of the things that I thought was really interesting is that they had different areas on the ship that were set up for different types of parties, right? They had a quiet area set up in one place. They had, obviously the central was kind of party central. That was like super loud. That's where the balloon drop was going to happen. They had countdown, DJ, all that stuff.
Wasn't there there was live cast to a couple of those ships, right? They shared.
I did not see that.
Yeah,
They may have had it in a different lounge, but Raj and I spent a lot of time
so.
in the South Pacific lounge because that was kind of the quiet zone.
Yeah.
But oddly enough, it was the quiet zone, but they were playing like EDM. And there's like little clips of Raj like dancing. You'll see in the video. There's like little clips of Raj dancing. So we've discovered that EDM like really works for Raj. It's okay. Well, that's why you go to the clubs every night and dance.
Sure.
But now we know. So
Good source of stimulation.
Raj and Dad are going to be hanging out at the clubs on the ships every night going forward.
Well, we won't be allowed. It's 18 to go. But
you can pretend.
Yeah. Anyways.
But it was really nice. When we got to dinner, it was on Dress Your Best night, right? New Year's Eve was Dress Your Best night, so people were already dressed up. But when we came to dinner, on the table. They had hats and like little, New Year's Eve kind of tiara type things. They had bead necklaces and little noisemakers. The special dinner menu for New Year's Eve. It was special. They were handing out, free champagne close to midnight, and I don't know. It felt like I
very neat experience.
I actually stayed up to midnight for the first time in like over a decade. Like I'm usually asleep. I'm a tired mom. I'm usually asleep by like 8 o'clock every night. So it's like a miracle.
Central was a really nice place, a nice venue for that sort of thing because it was packed, and it was a really neat experience.
Yeah, and like Raj actually, he stayed up. They had music pretty much all night long. If it was not, the DJ, they had the band on the ship playing, and if not the band, orchestra, and then the performers from the production on the ship, they were singing different numbers. They even had the hotel director singing at one point. Talita, the cruise director, sang
on a small ship,
couple songs. The officers
there's
seem
a
to
lot of
like
overflop
really,
from officers to entertainment staff. Some play double duty and they do it extremely well. It's probably one of the reasons. But yeah.
So it was really fun. I don't know that I would want to pay the premium to do another New Year's Eve cruise. But it was nice to
Might
experience
be a neat
it.
experience on a larger ship, like an Oasis class or something. Could be just to see what
the comparison.
Yeah.
And so Debarkation, again, Port of Miami. It was well organized. This is the first time that we've seen little conveyor belts like you have at the airport, where the luggage comes out on conveyor belts.
Takes up a lot less real estate because normally you're just in this big hangar-like area and numbered 1 to 50 or something like that, and then they lump them together and you go find the group that your name, your numbers assigned.
There's like 4 rooms and they're divvied up by numbers, and you go into this room. They have the conveyor belts. Just your luggage is just circling around until you get there, pick it off, and then head outdoors. It
didn't seem very congested because it seemed like I'm not sure of the timing of it, but it seemed like we got off and the bags came out about when we walked up to it within a couple minutes, and they weren't. It wasn't like people hadn't picked up their bags and moved on. It was pretty thin. I was surprised. Seems like a good system.
Yep.
Maybe it's more applicable to a smaller ship. Maybe that's a factor. Maybe there's a passenger number that just doesn't work. It's possible too. But it's worked out well.
And so exited the terminal. I think it took less than 10 minutes to get a lift.
Oh yeah.
To get our lift, and then from there, it was about a 45-minute drive from Miami to Fort Lauderdale. Our driver did tell us that based on the timing, it was 9 a.m. in the morning. Actually, just before 9 a.m. It was maybe 8:45.
Yeah.
He said if it had been even 20 minutes later, that our wait would have been at least a half an hour longer. So he said around 9:30 in the morning is when it starts to get very, very, very busy in that area. So just something to be mindful of if you do happen to be at Port Miami, about 9:15 to 9:30 in the morning.
Or
is
you're trying to rush to get to a flight that's earlier, like in later mid-morning or something. Maybe worth just being mindful of that and maybe getting off the ship a little early.
Do some debarkation. We love flying out of Worcester Airport, especially because of they only have outdoor parking, not indoor parking, which is fine. It didn't really snow while we were gone, or at least if it snowed, it melted off in the sunshine. We didn't have to clean anything off of our car. But the parking for the entire time we were gone was only $70. It's the highlight of my week, not having to pay for Logan parking. That's the best part of the whole trip.
To the point where I think going forward, if we have an ability to fly somewhere that we can fly out of Worcester, that's usually the first place we'll check, just because of the sheer convenience, the less stress for all of us.
very short drive for
and
us
the-
too. It's
and the-
much closer than Boston.
And the drive isn't through cities and high traffic areas either. So, anyways,
And so that's a wrap. That's another good trip overall.
Yep. It was a good cruise. It's a good experience for comparison to our other ones as well, which was one of the objectives, I think. Get some experience on the small ships, the older ships.
There it is. Thanks for watching. Till next
Bye.
time.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.